Nostalgia is an incredible thing. It is something that I think we all rely on and that we all just adore. I mean, we wouldn't be talking about retro video games or the toys we used to collect or the shows we used to watch when we were younger if nostalgia wasn't a powerful drug. What's going on, everybody? I'm Jay. Welcome to Square Pegs. Glad you're here today. It's been a couple of months since I've done a ranking video, and I don't like to just necessarily do, we're going to look at everything from a particular publisher. I like to kind of theme things out. Like a couple of years ago, I did every Simpsons game and ranked those. I ranked every EA Sports big game. Today, I'm taking it after school. We are looking at every single Disney afternoon video game ever released. Even one of them that's a homebrew. We're going to do this in alphabetical order. Let's kick things off. Here we go. Anyone that actually goes through the effort to make an entire homebrew game, especially one featuring a licensed property, is significantly braver and more talented than I can ever hope to be. With all that out of the way, the homebrew of Adventures of the Gummi Bears is atrocious. It is loosely based on the Gummi Bears. There's no even like key music that would make you think it's Gummi Bears related. You kind of get one of the characters. I mean, it's sort of like a crappy presentation of what one of the Gummi Bears characters look like. The gameplay is nearly non-existent. Oh man, it is just bad. It is so bad. I wish it was better. I really do, because talk about a franchise that was just like ripe to be a fantastic video game series, and it just never happened. And the one we got is not good. Not good. I'm giving this one an F, and A+ for the effort. It should be admired that someone decided to make a Gummi Bears game. It's just bad. It's just not well made. Gets an F. Bonkers on the Sega Genesis is a really different type of game. I had never actually played this one before I did this ranking video. I'd only played the SNES release of the game, and I was kind of expecting that one, but going into this one and getting something that was wildly different and not like anything I'd ever really played before was really interesting and honestly kind of intriguing, and kudos to the team that made this, because it's definitely its own thing. I don't necessarily think it's a good thing that it is, but it is decidedly its own game, and it stands on its own merits, and it fails on those merits at points as well. Is the game fun? I mean, it can be. I think there's definitely some quality challenge here, and I think there's some really interesting gameplay concepts at play here that decidedly feels like bonkers. It feels slapstick. It feels silly, and I think that should be commended. At the end of the day, I think it's probably just a very average game. I'm going to give this one a C. It's nothing that I ever really need to play again, and I do think the SNES release is significantly superior to the Genesis version, but kudos to them for taking a chance and trying something different. Bonkers on the SNES is a traditional platformer, and it is a traditional platformer in the sense that it takes a really interesting property that a lot of people have forgotten about, although people in comments have not forgotten about, because I've made offhanded comments about Bonkers in the past and been raked over the coals for it, which is kind of funny to me. But it is a property that I think a lot of people have just kind of overlooked or forgotten about in the, kind of the passage of time. But the game on the SNES is really solid. This is a really well-designed and well-executed platformer. It feels like a cartoon come to life. So much so that, like, the animations and the locomotion feel like something that stepped right out of ink and paint and onto your screen. And it's just something that I really enjoy and I really treasure. And I say that as someone who's not really a big fan of the cartoon. I don't really have a lot of time or interest in watching the cartoon, but I have a lot of fun playing this game. There's a solid challenge at play here that is different than what I would have expected based on the time frame of when this released. I would have expected it to be a lot easier and a lot simpler for kids to pick up, but it's a traditional, moderately difficult platformer. And I think a lot of that can be attributed to some of the design decisions and some of the locomotion aspects that I mentioned that make it feel a little more alive and a little more loose than other platformers at the time. It feels a little bit Maui Mallard, if that makes sense, where it's a little bit skatey and a little bit icy, but still really fun. I'm going to give Bonkers on the SNES an A-, or a B+. I'm going to give it a B+. It's not quite to an A level, but it is really fun. And if you haven't played it, you should probably check it out. Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers. I love this cartoon. I love this video game. This is Capcom at some of their absolute best, where something like DuckTales borrowed heavily from Mega Man, including assets to the point where we were borrowing assets from Mega Man. Chip and Dale did something unique and different and its own thing, and I think that should really be commended. And it's just such a testament to what Capcom was able to do in the 8-bit generation on the NES to make something this incredible and this advanced and this much fun. I love Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers. It is a fantastic platformer where you are using objects found in the level to actually use as your combat device to get through to eliminate enemies. And there's some really good kind of precision platforming elements in play as well, and it's just great. It's a multiplayer game as well, which is fantastic. This is just like signature Capcom here for me. Is it an S? No, because I actually prefer the sequel to this one, but it is an A+. Normally I grade sequels a little bit harder than I do the original, but there's just something about Rescue Rangers 2 that I prefer to the original. And it's not to say the original is bad. I mean, you saw it, I just gave it an A, but I love Rescue Rangers 2, and it might be because there's a little bit of mystique here, because this wasn't something I ever played as a kid. I didn't actually know there was a Rescue Rangers sequel until probably 4 or 5 years ago. So to find what, to me, was this piece of lost software starring an IP that I adore, and being able to play it and just have this entire world open up to me that was brand new, but was old, if that makes any sense, was something that I just adored and I loved. And yes, those kind of just like that impression of finding something new that stars two of my favorite characters from one of my favorite cartoons as a kid definitely is doing a bit of the heavy lifting here. I think mechanically it's pretty much on par with the original Rescue Rangers. I think level design, it's pretty well on par. I just prefer this one a little bit more than I preferred the original. To me, Rescue Rangers 2 gets an S. Your mileage may vary, and I totally respect you if you do not think it's as good as the first one, but I hope the reasons I provided in this little description here of why I enjoy it so much helps you understand why I rank it higher. He is the terror that flaps in the night! He is Darkwing Duck! This is Darkwing Duck on the NES, and I am a fan of this game, although it's kind of, I think, Stockholm Syndrome as to why I'm a fan of this game, because it's not an easy title, and it is unforgiving as hell. It is a brutally difficult platformer that has some of the, to me at least, and if you are a savant at this game and this is something that you breeze through, just please take it with a grain of salt that this is just something that I have never connected to gameplay-wise to find a rhythm or find a skill set pattern to it to be able to be successful at playing this game. But that doesn't change the fact that I love it. I do think it is a fantastic title. I do think that difficulty for me brings it down a little bit. It is not something that I look at as kind of like an upper echelon title. I know for some folks, my friend Gary from Rock Solid Productions adores this game. And for me, it just comes down a little bit because I can't get through that difficulty for some reason. I don't know why. But it's still the quality game. I'm going to give it a B+. It's an excellent title. It's almost an A, but it just doesn't quite get there for me. Now, I've seen my friend E.C. Myers play this game on streams before, and I've heard other people talk about it, but I've never actually played it myself until capturing this footage, and they were all right. This game's terrible. This is so bad. This is Darkwing Duck on the TurboGrafx 16, and it is something that should ideally be spectacular. It should take advantage of what the TurboGrafx was able to do. A brilliant little system that is just wildly overlooked by people, and just, it should be more important, I guess. I can't think of a better word here. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit sick. But more important in like the grand pantheon of video gamedom from the 16-bit generation, and instead it just kind of gets forgotten. But then I play games like this and I realize that there's probably a reason parts of it get forgotten, because this game sucks ass. It is so bad. It is almost an F. I'm going to give Darkwing Duck on the TurboGrafx a D- because it's just unforgivingly difficult. It's not fun to play. The controls suck, and it's just, it's not good. It's a bad game. Bad, bad, bad. A lot of folks forget that Doug of, Doug fame, I guess, cartoon of the same name, Doug Funny from Doug, was a Disney afternoon show. And that's because the show actually started on Nickelodeon. So to me, it's a Nicktoons character, but eventually he moved over to the Disney afternoon in the late 90s. And this game here, Doug's Big Game, was actually released by Disney Interactive. And it's bad. It's not good. It's a Game Boy Color game, and there doesn't really seem to be a whole lot to do other than to walk around, find money, and try to get to the Beats concert. So you can go see Patty Mayonnaise, Doug's lifelong love. I don't know. It's just, it's not great. I probably would have been served to have a manual for this that would have made it a little bit easier. It took me a while to kind of figure out that I needed to go to the map to be able to go anywhere. I thought I could just move around the levels and go to different spots, but that wasn't the case. The gameplay is non-existent. It's just not good. It's not a good game. I'm giving Doug's Big Game a D. It's slightly better than Darkwing Duck on the TurboGrafx, but it is not good at all. All right, halfway there. Here's where the rankings stand right now. Life is like a hurricane here in Duckburg. This gets an S. I'm not even going to go into this in depth because this game's just spectacular. DuckTales is an S. It's a perfect game. It's fantastic. DuckTales 2. So remember the part when I was talking in Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers 2 how I usually grade sequels a little bit more difficultly than I do the original? Yeah, here's where that comes into play. I don't like DuckTales 2 as much as I like DuckTales 1. I don't think it is worth the price it's going for right now. Just from a financial perspective, I don't look at it and say, yes, you should spend that amount of money on this game that is decidedly not as good as the first one. I don't think the level designs are as good, although I do like the Haunted Mansion in this one. I think that's a pretty remarkable level, but I don't think the level designs are good. I don't think the gameplay is as polished. It's basically the same thing, but for me, it just feels a little bit looser. I don't think the characters are as well done. Like, the enemies aren't as interesting as they are in the first game, and the music isn't as good. Like, it just does not work as well for me as the first one did. And that could be nostalgia doing a lot of heavy lifting, because I do love that first one so much, and it is a game that I treasure. But for me, DuckTales 2 just takes a massive step back from the perfection of what was the original DuckTales. I'm giving DuckTales 2 a B. It's still good. Don't get me wrong. Like, I'm saying all this negative crap about it, but it's still a good game. It's just not a perfect game. Now, we're going to step up to modern generations now and go with DuckTales Remastered here, which to me is such a wonderful continuation of the original DuckTales and kind of a retelling of that story. I was ecstatic when I found out we were getting a DuckTales Remastered released. And it was something where I was so happy to get the game, and so just visually the game is stunning. And yes, there is the way forward curve here for me. I'm always going to grade way forward stuff high, but visually it's stunning. But where the game really set itself apart for me was the fact that they brought in the original voice cast and had them reprise their roles. It's magical to be able to hear those original actors back in the roles like they didn't miss a beat, to hear Uncle Scrooge talking to Webby and Huey, Dewey, and Louie and Launchpad. It's just, it's magic. It's an absolutely magical game. I love it. To me, this is the exact reason that we should have remasters in the video game industry, because of games like DuckTales Remastered. It's an S. It's a perfect title. Not about to let a bunch of silly superstitions stand between. I want to love Gargoyles on the Genesis. I want to adore this game because Gargoyles, of all of the cartoons in the Disney afternoon, Gargoyles was the one for me. This was my favorite. I adored the show. I thought it was incredible. A dark, gothic telling of a fantastic fantasy story featuring basically the cast of Star Trek The Next Generation. It was amazing. It was a fantasy cartoon that didn't pull any punches. It was dark. It was aggressive. It was violent. It was not traditional Disney. And when there was a Gargoyles video game announced, I was so excited because it was just nothing I had ever anticipated or expected to play. It was not something that I ever thought I would see. And the game is just so middle of the road and so average in every single way. It's just not great. The controls aren't great. The logic behind the game doesn't really work for me. It's overly difficult at times. It's just not fun. I'm giving Gargoyles a C. It's middle of the road. Gargoyles Remastered is another modern release. This is actually out on modern consoles on the Switch, PS4, and Xbox One, I believe. And it is also a very middle of the road game. Like, when this got announced, I was excited. I was hoping there was going to be some TLC given and just some more kind of love given to the game to make it a little bit more enjoyable, a little bit better. And the only thing that it really does that sets it apart is it's got a fresh coat of paint and it's a little bit prettier. I like that it looks like the cartoon come to life, and I like that you can hot swap between the modern look and the classic 16-bit look, but that's not enough to really bump it up that far. I'm going to give Gargoyles Remastered a C+. It's a little bit better, but it's not enough to make it fun. Goof Troop is not a game that I had played before I did my Capcom SNES ranking a few years back, and it was not one that I expected to be good, because honestly, the cartoon I never cared for. I was never interested in. Like, I'm not someone that adored the Goofy movie or anything like that. Like, I have no love for Powerline. Sorry, Powerline fans, but I didn't expect to enjoy this one. And what I got was one of my favorite puzzle games on the Super Nintendo. It is a fantastic multiplayer game, first off, but even single player, it's a wonderful experience because it's just so true to what you would want it to be. Like, you have to explore this island. You use Max or Goofy. You pick up different items. You're able to defeat the pirates that are on the island and move through the different levels, collecting different items and different power-ups and things like that. It's just, I love it. It's so much fun, and it's so well designed, and it doesn't try to do too much. Like, it's set out to be a good puzzle game, and it sticks that landing perfectly. Goof Troop, for me, is an S. I love this game. I know for a lot of folks, they're not going to feel the same way. This just isn't their thing, but for me, I adore it. Wonderful, wonderful game. I wanted to like TaleSpin on the NES. I really did. I loved the TaleSpin cartoon. I thought it was a creative use of the Jungle Book characters. I thought it was a really neat idea, really neat concept. I loved the look of the cartoon, and I thought that could have been a really fun game to play. And instead, what we got was like this incredibly mediocre shooter that doesn't control well, that doesn't play well, that doesn't look great. It doesn't really feel like TaleSpin. Like, it just doesn't to me. I don't know. I know there's some folks out there that really like this game, but for me, when I'm looking at it and I'm playing what is essentially a side-scrolling shmup, I'm not getting something that to me is enjoyable in the slightest. The firing delays, the hit detection, the fact that enemies shoot faster than you're able to, it's unfair and it's not fun, and that sucks. I really wanted this to be more enjoyable than it is, and it just doesn't work for me. TaleSpin on the NES gets a D. It's not a failure, but it's not fun. It's not something I really enjoy playing at all. TaleSpin on the Genesis is moderately better than the NES release. Rather than being a shmup, it's a traditional platformer starring Baloo. And it's okay. It doesn't really do anything exceptional other than having Baloo as the main character. It's kind of loose. It's not really super fun to play. The jumps need to be a little bit more precise than I think should be necessary for a game of this type. It's really middle of the road. It does a lot of things pretty well. Like, the look of the game is solid. It's fun to actually like attack enemies with the paddle ball. I think that's pretty neat. The gameplay itself, though, like just like kind of the objective of the game is a little bit kind of analogous and doesn't really, I don't know. It just doesn't really completely connect for me. There's definitely some missing pieces here that I wish I enjoyed more than I do. If you love this one, let me know why. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. But for me, TaleSpin on the Genesis comes in middle of the road. It's going to get a C. There you have it, my friends. Every single Disney Afternoon video game ranked, including the homebrew for Adventures of the Gummi Bears. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope this brought back some positive memories of great video games, great cartoons that we used to love. Let me know in the comments down below if I was off the mark, if I was right on the mark, if there was anything you agreed or disagreed with. Let me know your favorite Disney Afternoon show and why it was. I would love to hear from you. Till next time, folks, I've been Jay. Appreciate you spending a little bit of time with me. This is your first time here. I do a couple videos a week. I'd love to have you stick around. Why don't you click that subscribe button? And if you enjoyed today's video, hit the thumbs up as well. The engagement helps the channel out. Remember to play more games, stay square, and take care. I'll talk to you soon.